talking today about change management. We are, of course, recording and we are streaming. So I just wanted to put that disclaimer out there. You should see the little Zoom boxes pop up. But in the event you didn't, I wanted everybody to know that. So today we're talking about managing change management. And Shauna and I were just, talking about the fact that sometimes change management and even just all of the structure around change management can feel really over-engineered. It can feel as though there's this big infrastructure that's somewhat unnecessary. And there are times where change management and the infrastructure associated with change management are really important. There are certain industries, if we think about like the tech industry and programming and making changes to software, having change management controls in place are really, really important so that, as one person upgrades a certain aspect of the system, it doesn't break another part of the system. So there's one just industry where we can see the importance for change management. Other times when a larger organization is going through big sweeping changes, it's nice to have that infrastructure in place of change management where there are the checks and balances, where there is a well thought out plan about why changes are being made and an execution timeline and a task force that's monitoring the outcomes and the responses. These are all necessary things when an organization is going through large sweeping changes. Other times, change management is really just change. And managing people and managing our own and our people's reactions and their uptake of change can be a tough time for a leader, right? If we are leading people through an organization, whether directly leading them or indirectly leading them, and changes are being made in that organization, even if you're not directly responsible for rolling out the ideas of the changes or actually executing on the changes, if you're just living the day-to-day and experiencing those changes, that can still be challenging. And one thing I want us all to be thinking about, and that doesn't, I think, get enough discussion when we're talking about change management, is the fact that as individuals, we are actually biologically programmed. It's been evolutionarily advantageous for us to resist change, right? When we as a herd animal see change, that is something that is not comfortable for us. Even if it's something that we think we want, we still may be on a subconscious level resisting that change. So I think that that's an incredibly important thing for leaders to take into account when talking about changes, when leading others through changes, because so many of us resist it, right? Some of us resist it up front, and some of us in a more almost insidious way, because we think we're not resisting it, do things subconsciously that might subvert and go against the change that we are trying to see, the behavioral changes or even the operational changes that we may be trying to see. There's actually a formula, Gleischer's formula, it's sometimes called Dana Miller's formula because she refined it, where when looking at change, change is dissatisfaction times vision and concrete steps, and that all has to be greater than the resistance. So if you think about it in the context of like, you need to understand, if you're formulating change for an organization, you need to understand what the dissatisfaction is. You need to understand the full entirety of it. And you do that, of course, through communication, through listening, through working with people. And then you also need to understand what the vision is. Where are you going? So you've got all this yuck here the dissatisfaction that you want to change. And then you need to know where you're going to go. And that takes some time to craft. And you also have to have some very concrete first steps. It needs to be crystal clear what the changes are in order for people to start to get on board. And those three things together, right? The dissatisfaction, the vision, and the concrete first steps all need to be greater than the resistance that people feel. Now, a lot of that's really hard to quantify, right? But it's it's a valuable formula, I think, to have in our arsenal, because when sitting down and thinking about why isn't this change working, or how do I optimize this change as you're planning, think about those things. Think about the dissatisfaction, right? And scope out everything around the dissatisfaction. Think about the vision and scope out again everything about the vision. Of course, I'm just going to take just a side note, like this is not something anybody should ever do in a vacuum, right? You may, and then I take that back. So you may be thinking about a small change that you want to make within your team. And in that instance, you are pulling upon everything that you're getting in terms of feedback and communication through your one-on-ones with your team. And you may know what the dissatisfaction is. You may know what the vision is, and you may know what the first few concrete steps are that you think will overcome any resistance to change. So you could appear to be working in a vacuum as you formulate that, but really you're getting that because of your one-on-ones, because of your interactions with your team, and you're learning about what they need and what the vision is. And so that is still not you working alone. And then of course, in larger organizations, whenever somebody comes in new, or the leadership decides they need to make a massive change, it's because there's something that's not working that they need to work to overcome. And they should be, hopefully, polling their people or their customers or whomever that is experiencing said dissatisfaction, right? So do keep that in mind, that leadership, and this all goes with the power with, attitude, the leadership during change management needs to include feedback from everyone. So I'm going to just pause here. And Elise, I know you came in a little late. I just want to see if anybody has any questions so far on, the managing of change management.
No, for now makes total sense. I agree. Sorry, I cut in and out and then it dropped me off. And
that's okay. No worries. We're glad you're here. Yeah, Stacy, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you, Tara?
Good. Any questions on what we've talked about so far?
No, this is really interesting. I'm all ears.
Okay. All right. So let's draw it back to like a personal example, because I talked a bit about how we as humans resist change. Has anybody out there, and you can give examples or not, it's totally up to you, but have you ever decided to change something in your life? And then, being gung-ho, let's just use the January 1st, I'm going to the gym every day. It's not COVID. Like, let's pretend it's all normal, right? So January 1st, going to the gym, I'm going to go to the gym every day. And for like the first 8 days, you're all about it. And then all of a sudden on day 9, you're like, I should go to the gym. I haven't gone to the gym today. I'm going every day. And you're like, I'm not going to go. And there's not even any real reason. Like maybe you're not that fatigued because you've been managing your workouts well, right? And you've been giving yourself proper rest. And for some reason, you just feel this reluctance to do this thing. Has anybody ever experienced something like that?
Yeah, that's very common, I think.
Yeah, it is. And it goes back to our reluctance to change, right? And it's like maybe those 8 days you felt phenomenal. Like I said, 8 days, I won't get into working out, but like 8 days of working out straight, if you've been doing it every day, you hopefully have been taking some solid rest days, like, in there. But you've been feeling great. And all of a sudden, even though you've been feeling great, you're like, I'm going to take a break. And all of a sudden you get off that bandwagon and you know that you want to do things differently, but for some reason you don't. And just the knowledge of knowing like, that's some of my like subconscious programming. Why, I'm a herd animal. This is like a comfort is status quo. Comfort is not changing. Even that knowledge can help us bring greater awareness to ourselves when we're looking to make change. And then as a leader, when we're trying to lead others through change, helping people to understand the resistance to change is not calling them out and saying, hey, it looks like you really don't want to change the way that we're doing this report. It's instead finding out from them what's going on. So how are you feeling about the new report that we're implementing? What do you think about the structure? How have you been assimilating it into your workplace? And helping them to ask questions of themselves so that they can hopefully for themselves get to the heart of any resistance that they have, right? We may see that resistance and we might, as leaders, want to talk with our individuals about it or team members about it. And the best, I would say that one of the best ways to do so is not to say, it seems like you're resisting this, but maybe you can say, hey, I observed this behavior and I'm just curious what's going on for you about this. What do you feel? And helping them to dig deeper, because as humans, we don't tend to dig deep unless it's something we're conscious of, unless we're really present, unless it's something that we are training ourselves to do. But getting to the heart of what the resistance is, helping individuals think about why they might be resisting change, can all go to support you in driving your team through a change management process. Does anybody have any changes that they're going through right now that they might want to just put out there for coaching scenarios? Quiet group today. That's okay. That's all right. All right, now let's talk about something else then, and I'll shift gears a little. But no, this offer stands. If you come up with an idea and you want to talk about it, please jump on it. What happens when an organization is making its change and you're not responsible for having made those decisions? You're not responsible for rolling out how the changes are happening. You're responsible for helping it to actually happen, right? You didn't do the rollout of it, but you're putting it into practice and you don't agree with it. Anybody ever been in that situation?
I have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you want to tell us about the situation?
I don't remember anything like specific, but I mean, a lot of times it's just like it's mostly like a new procedure or like a new template, and it's maybe missing some information that you think is important. So I mean, I guess like what is the question? Like, how do you handle it? Is that the question?
Well, I think my question was, in your situation, if you remember, when you are learning about this change that is to happen and you're to be sort of operationalizing it or whatever the thing may be, and you feel like, I don't know that I agree with this. My point is, and I didn't know if you had any specifics, but it sounds like it might have been a while ago. Really, at that point, somebody's probably doing a lousy job of communicating what the change is. Or it's possible that they haven't really thought it through as well, and they don't understand all of the downstream impacts. So as a leader that is positive, and I'm not talking, toxic positivity here, I'm talking about a leader that's forward thinking, forward moving. How do you go about collecting your thoughts on it, understanding how your team's feeling about the implementation, and asking questions? Really, you just need to be in open communication. And I've been in a situation myself, and this was a number of years ago, where something was being rolled out and I thought it was the worst idea. And I asked a bunch of questions during the training on it. I was trying to understand and get to the heart of what the reason why was, because I didn't fully understand it. And the why was just that there was this dissatisfaction, and that's fine. But the vision to me didn't address the dissatisfaction. It was just something else that could ultimately cause dissatisfaction. And so that was really hard for me as a leader of a team. I managed a bunch of people, and I was, indirectly managing other teams, to be talking positively about this change. And yet I wanted to get as much feedback as I could on this change as we were trying it, and to funnel that feedback back to leadership. So really, in situations like that, I've found, and everybody has their own comfort level, it's best to be like, for me, this is me, I'm not quite sure why we're doing this. And this is what the new plan is, though. And let's try and operationalize it. Let's talk about it. Let's come up with our questions, and we're going to continue to funnel them back to management so that hopefully their message will be refined. And really, if you're in a management position and you have this great vision and you and your team have rolled it out, recognize that you're going to continue to get feedback, that all through this change management, it's going to be a feedback loop, right? People are going to have questions about the why. People are going to have questions about the vision. People are just going to resist because people are going to resist. As you begin to implement it, you will learn about things that maybe you didn't think about, downstream impacts or offshoots of ideas that actually could make it better. All of these things need to be taken into account and filtered through whoever's making the decisions so that the messaging is refined, so that the vision is even refined, right? And so that the communication about the why is refined. In the example that I had, it was actually a pilot that went on for like 1.5 years of brutal, pilotness, and was then abandoned because it really was not a very good idea. And I felt good in my authenticity as a leader, having been like, okay, this is the change. This is what we're doing. I don't understand it. Let's keep collecting questions. Let's keep trying it. And we would try it. And the key here is that I wouldn't let my teams revert back to old ways of working, which was the desire. And it was somewhat possible just because of the way that this change impacted the organization, that people could kind of go back to their old ways of working. We use that when we needed to just get it done. Like when we've tried this pilot way of doing things now 2-3 times. Okay, our clients are going to get frustrated. Let's just get it done, right? Other times we would do the pilot way of working and it would work, but it wouldn't work as well. And we'd give some feedback. Sometimes it would work just fine and we'd give that feedback as well. I think what's important as a leader is to be authentic in how you communicate it and talk about it, to continue to try and implement the change, right? Don't abandon it just because you can. If the organization chooses to abandon it, that's another thing. And to be a part of that communication and feedback loop. Too often I see people shut down in their frustration and they know that their teams are upset. They themselves are upset or frustrated and they feel like they keep giving feedback that's not heard. And as a result, they shut down. And it can be really easy to do that because we're tired of talking when it seems like no one is listening. We're tired of funneling information back when it seems to go to this black hole. Try not to get tired. Pace yourself and continue to give that information back because really that is what the organization needs. And in that situation, that organization was this monstrous, huge beast, right? And it seemed as though the feedback we were constantly giving was going into a black hole, but we didn't stop giving it. And I think ultimately it was valuable in their decision-making to abandon that pilot. So did that trigger anything for anybody? Any thoughts about experiences that you've had when organizations have tried to implement changes or experiences you may even be having now?
I'm reminded of a situation that we're going through now with the change. And I guess I can't imagine saying to someone, like, I don't understand it. Like, I feel like it's my role to be like, this is what we're doing and be really behind it, even though I don't agree with it. And that's what's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. So just as a side note, next week, we're going to talk about toxic positivity. We had another theme, but I can't train on something I don't experience myself. And the group that I was hoping to have come in, it just didn't work. So we're going to be talking about toxic positivity next week. And I'm not saying that you are saying that you want to be like, this is the best change ever, right? That would be more toxic positivity. But you're saying, how would you find yourself or how would you feel authentic talking about something and still feel like you're in your role performing what you need to do for your organization? Is that appropriate to say?
So I guess I'm trying to figure out how I would be able to, not get frustrated about the change and also say to my team, that I support this change. When I don't, I can't say that I expect it to change. Like, even if we gather feedback, I think decision has been made. We have to implement it. This is what we have to do. So.
Okay. Can I ask a couple questions?
Yeah.
All right. So have you, when this change was rolled out to you, and have you asked questions about why? Like, do you know the pain points or the dissatisfaction that is trying to be fixed?
Yeah. There's some like GDPR reasons as to why they want to do it. So it's, yeah.
Okay. So perhaps even mandated via regulations in some areas.
But there's also, for me, it was another solution that, the situation was that, like I'm a recruiter, and when we send tests for grading, we had been sending a resume with it. The grader wanted to see the test and the resume of the person. The decision was made to remove the name of the person, but he opted now cut and paste the information into a form, so the grader will see the experience and the education. But my point was that shouldn't we just be evaluating the test and not the person's experience, and not have to cut and paste this information into a form? We're all busy enough anyway, but that's the situation.
So you have a situation where for your team, they're going to have to do extra work. Right. And it seems as though it's not for a very good reason.
Right. Like if we want to evaluate based upon the assessment, shouldn't we just be evaluating based upon what they just submitted? Yeah, that's my point. Yeah. But I haven't won the argument, so.
Right. Well, and so this is where, you have to be comfortable with how authentic you're being with your team. And, every company is different, and every manager of our, of who we reported to, everybody there is different. Would you feel comfortable? What would you say to them right now? Like, what would you say if, say I was working for you, and now I have to do this thing, I have to cut and paste. How would you explain this to me?
I would say, well, the decision has been made that we can no longer share resumes with the test grading team. Instead, we're going to use this templated form to cut and paste their education and their experience in it so that it's blinded. And the reason we're doing this is because the grading team feels that they can provide a better, assessment knowing the background of the person. But we have to take the name out to the GDPR. So I apologize from the company that we have this extra work to do, but this is what we've been asked to do going forward.
And what if I say, but that's a lot of extra work?
Yeah. Well, if our coordinator has time to help, and not scheduling a lot of interviews, the coordinator will help with this process.
Okay, so I have an added resource that might help me.
Possibly, no guarantee.
Possibly. Well, yeah, that one coordinator never helps me. She's always too busy.
Right. Yeah, and she may not have the time, but yeah, hopefully we can it just takes a few, how long does it take to cut and paste? We'll just have to get it done.
Yeah, it probably took longer for me to push back than it did for me to cut and paste. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I thought that your explanation of the situation and the rationale, the explanation that, it's because of GDPR, I thought that was great. I wonder about the apologizing on behalf of the company. What do you think about that?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Probably not necessary. Yeah. Yeah. It's just my always trying to please, that's not necessary.
Right. It's just sort of the way it is. And sometimes like with things like GDPR, well, these are new legislations, or not so new. We're just all trying to implement them, and things change because of them. Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that you did a great job explaining it. I think you did a great job managing my resistance as your employee about it. And there are changes and things like this that just have to happen. Right. And yeah. This is more of an operational change than like a behavioral change or an attitude change. And so another thing that I would just flag is keeping people's morale up. Like, you know, I don't know how many saw way back when the movie Office Space, but I think about like the new TPS report, right? And this is sort of the recruiting equivalent of that. Like, did you get the new report? Did you get the new template? You know, you want to make sure that people just understand this is part of doing business, and it is the way that things go. And sometimes it's an inconvenience, and it just is what it is. And so what's probably really critical for you is just keeping everybody energized and knowing that you don't have to love it, but it's just the way it is. Yeah. And it's not our job to apologize for changes in policy that we didn't invoke ourselves. But yeah, we do want to always please people, right? Very often we have tendencies to want to please. So that's valuable to know too. Elisa, I know you're working with a company where there was, at least when you and I were first talking about you consulting for this company, a lot of resistance to change.
Yeah, it's still there. I've decided, speaking of, trying to be authentic to myself, I have decided that I do not agree with that structure overall, and that there is no willingness to try anything different. That's why I decided to remain as a consultant. That's a way for me to still help, but not to have to necessarily fully agree with something that I don't think it's workable and viable.
Right.
So that was my compromise, to kind of stay true to myself. But I've seen similar instances like the one that was just brought up, to where, management comes up with, this new change, and you're at the end, at the receiving end, and you're like, okay, I need to make it work. And similarly, it's like, okay, this is what we need to do. And I don't have necessarily a super precise, example top of my head, but it's like, okay, let's figure out how to best do it. And then I usually turn it into, how do we make it part of our workflow, right? What can we do so that this becomes part of our workflow? What are the issues? And then I invite everybody to sort of like, hey, tell me how you would do it otherwise, in terms of like still do what we need to do, but let's say that we have the freedom to choose how we implement it, right? And then that's the part where people can feel like I'm contributing, and I have, quote, something to solve for. It's like, oh, I need to do this new thing. I don't necessarily agree 100%, but I get to decide how I still get it done. And to me, that is a way that motivates me to help motivate others. So I sort of like, I need to get myself to that point so that I can support others. And that's how I typically do it. To, if I have no choice and I have to take it, then I have to figure it out in one way or another.
Yeah, no, I think you've brought up two really important points. Thank you. One is that incorporating, especially these operational changes into your workflow. So for Stacy and her team, maybe previously the recruiter would just forward the CV and the the test to the grader. And now instead, when they get the test, they need to cut and paste the CV. Well, as part of their workflow, as they build in their schedules, maybe instead of just 5 minutes to do that task, now they need 10 minutes. Well, keep that in mind as you're planning, right? So incorporating it into your workflow, making any adjustments that you need. And then Elisa, the other thing that you've put forward, which is really great, is looking at implementations and alternatives to implementations. And I would say, even if you are told that the X, Y, and Z need to be done, there's still the possibility to say, well, we can get to Z, but we could also do S and T, or, what other way could we get to Z? And it can't hurt to listen to your team, or to even ask your team, if you have another way to do this, how would you do it? And to get that information and funnel it back. It might not be doable for some other reason. It might not be adopted for some other reason, but it is still engaging and motivating to teams to have that opportunity. So that's a great add.
Right. Because a lot of times it's maybe a relatively high level decision. It still doesn't have all the details in there, right? And that's where one can get their teams a little bit more excited about, let's figure out the details.
Yes.
And also I have to say, in my experience, for most part, as long as the kind of direction is clear, even if everybody's not like, super 100% excited about it, but most people just adapt. It's like, all right, fine, we need to do this thing, all right, we'll do it. Right.
Yeah.
So, yes, there is maybe some resistance, but I've noticed over the years and working with a lot of different people that it's like eventually they're just like, okay, fine, we'll just do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of like becomes more of a routine. I don't think I've ever really found anybody that was so against it that became really a problem, and for myself, it's like I'm at the level where I feel like I can make that kind of call to where it's like, if I really do not agree, then I need to find a different solution so that I don't get myself, like, I don't create a problem for the company. That's why I went for the consulting solution. If I were at a lower level, it would be a different response, right? I can't just be like, oh, well, then I'm just leaving, right? Or, I'll come up with something crazy. It would be more like, all right, I'll figure out a way to get it done.
Yeah, exactly. Where I really see and where I've experienced companies roll something out that then has not been adopted, even though it was said that it would be mandated, is when they don't mandate it. And most often related to new software technology. So for example, a new system that would replace Excel spreadsheets, for example, of tracking, right? And I've watched team after team either refuse to use the system or use it sort of half-heartedly, and then state that they can't get what they need from it, right? Whereas if you're actually mandating that everybody's working in that system, you then can give feedback on what is working and what's not. And maybe there are things and aspects of that system that need to be programmed to make it more usable. There's an example where, as a leader, the more that you can force your team to be operationalizing it in a system, the more feedback you're going to get. And that's really, I've seen an organization or a couple now that I'm thinking of do not a great job of a rollout of a system like that. And thus teams continue to sort of work the way that they always worked. And those systems aren't adopted in as timely a fashion as they could be. They don't overcome all of the dissatisfaction that was there. The vision is not accomplished. And for years, it just sort of languishes until finally somebody steps in and says, wait, we spent X millions of dollars on that system. Why are we not exporting data from that? Why are you keeping these manual spreadsheets? And then finally somebody mandates it. It's kind of ridiculous, actually, when I look back on those experiences. But yeah, I think as leaders, the more you make a very good point that people do adapt to the change. There may be that initial resistance. There may even be resistance that doesn't seem to be initial, but sort of raises its sort of insidious head as you're working through things. And knowing that, working and supporting your people, communicating up and down and everywhere as you need to about that is how we can help each other work through significant changes. All right, anything else anybody wants to talk about today? Okay, so next week, we're going to talk about toxic positivity. And then the week after that, we'll be talking about your leadership story. And then starting August 30th, once again, we're doing our Leading with Your Whole Self workshop. So if you're not registered and you'd like to register, please go ahead and get signed up. We'll put the link the link's everywhere, right? The link's in our Instagram. It's we can make sure it's in the updated Zoom invite that I'll send out. So I'm going to send out an updated Zoom invite that has the proper topic for next week, and hopefully we'll fix the Zoom meeting issue link that we had. So thanks everyone for joining today and for your time and feedback. If you've got any questions, don't hesitate to ask, and I hope you all have a great rest of your Wednesday. All right. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. You too. Bye. Bye.